All right, my friend. Richard, stay in touch. Hey, by the way, if you're like most people, you reach for a sugar substitute because you've been told it's good for you, right? And that it should save you from the evils of sugar and that it would even help you trim off those extra pounds. But I don't think that's so. According to the Douglas Report, aspartame is one of the most dangerous substances ever added to food. Not only has aspartame been proven to make you fatter, it's been proven to cause some pretty serious diseases, not the least of which are cancer and neurological diseases as well. Well, up next, Dr. Betty Martini joins us as we talk about aspartame, diabetes, and other side effects next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Dr. Betty Martini spent 22 years in the medical field, founder of the Missouri Possible International, an organization that educates the public on the dangers of aspartame. Dr. Martini works with world experts and has operations in most states and over 30 countries. It's Mission Possible International. Here she is back on Coast to Coast. Hey, Betty, how are you?
Oh, I'm just great, George. I'm so glad to be back with you, and there is so much news on aspartame.
Oh, this stuff is unbelievable. Now, what's the latest about it in diabetes?
Well, there's an article out that says diabetes may affect as many as 1 in 3 Americans by 2050. Well, I'm surprised that it says by 2050 because you got half the country and lots of the world using this stuff. And you know Dr. H.J. Roberts is a diabetic specialist that wrote the medical text, and he's always said that aspartame can precipitate diabetes. But not only that, it simulates and aggravates diabetic retinopathy and neuropathy. It destroys the optic nerve. It causes diabetics to go into convulsions. It interacts with insulin. And the free methyl alcohol causes diabetics to lose their limbs. So a lot of times they'll say, well, they're diabetics, they're going blind. But you got this free methyl alcohol that's converting to formaldehyde and formic acid in the retina of the eye. And it causes optic neuritis, macular degeneration, and total blindness. One of the reasons we work so hard to warn people is that Dr. Morgan Rayford, who owned the Atlanta Eye Hospital here in Atlanta, and he was an ophthalmologist, but he was the specialist in methanol toxicity, and I inherited his records. And he says if, you warn people in time and it's vision's still in the wet stage, you can get your vision back. And we've gotten so many people who were legally blind gotten their vision back because we were able to get them in time. So when diabetics are using aspartame, the doctors have no idea they're using free methyl alcohol, and they're not going blind from diabetes, they're going blind from aspartame. And so it has caused this diabetic epidemic, and the doctors agree. And in 2004, somebody filed racketeering charges against the American Diabetes Association because, these professional organizations...
Well, they endorse aspartame, don't
right.
they? Yeah.
They take money from the industry, and they push it on them. And even though they got out of it, they turned right around and continue to do that. And many times we walk with diabetics at these walkathons, and they're wearing equal shirts. And it's very interesting. I know one time they called the police. They saw us come in with long stem yellow roses, and it was because somebody had died from aspartame, and the press got them along with sympathy cards and black lace, getting the idea out. And finally, the police said, well, they're just trying to warn these diabetics. This is public land. Let them do it. And so by the time that it was over and we'd given out all this material, we started getting calls back from diabetics, that their problems had completely disappeared and their blood sugar was normal. And just to see what is causing, in fact, one of the cases that I remember the most is in my own family, when someone came to Atlanta on the way to Florida and said, I've just stopped in a minute. William Reed's dying. He's not expected to live out the day. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why is he dying? Well, He's having 6 or 8 seizures a day.
Oh, my gosh.
All kinds of problems. I said, what is he, a diabetic using lots of aspartame, going blind, MS symptoms? She said, well, yes. I said, well, call him and tell him he doesn't have to die. And it was almost kind of humorous because she gets on the phone and she said, William, Betty says you don't have to die after all. But as it turned out, she came back about 3 days later and she stood in the door and she says, his seizures stopped. And if I hadn't stopped in Atlanta, she says, he'd be dead. And I said, yes, and they're dying all over the world. Well, this is an interesting case because my husband once lived in Michigan, and he went back a few weeks ago, and he went to see William Reed. This is 15 years later, and he's just fine, and he's driving again, and his vision has returned.
That is incredible. So yes. Why hasn't there been, at least I don't know of, a class action suit against the manufacturers of this stuff?
Well, the attorneys tell me this. It's like a third world war. He says that you have to have the millions of dollars of tobacco attorneys. And there was this courageous attorney in Oklahoma that took six cases. And as soon as that happened, they sent in their big guns. He says, I have to dismiss them because if I don't, they can never be set back up if they dismiss them. And they're powerful. And, they always manage to get something done because in 1986, the Community Nutrition Institute and James Turner, attorney, petitioned the FDA to ban aspartame because so many people were having the seizures and going blind. And they took this all the way to the Supreme Court. And this was way before my time, so I said, well, what happened? And the person that was around said it was a corrupt judge. They just get to everybody.
That is unbelievable.
And, just to show you, this is almost borders on the twilight zone, but Dr. Monte, who is in Arizona, tried to get a hearing because, it breaks down at 86 degrees, and you know how hot it gets in Arizona, and you have formaldehyde cocktails sitting outside 7-Elevens. And first, they turned it down, and the lobbyist came, and he finally got a hearing. They actually took a bill on toxic waste that had already passed and took the guts of the bill out and wrote up something to prevent the regulation of artificial sweeteners and squelched the hearing from ever happening.
As bad as sugar is, and I don't use it, aspartame is worse, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, I'm glad you brought that up because you may think, well, I'll just go to take something else. We won't use aspartame. And incidentally, people need to know they changed the name to amino sweet. It has other names.
That's a good point, Betty, because now when they start reading ingredients, they may not see aspartame. They'll see that, right?
Right. And they had it in artificial and natural flavors, and you got Equal, NutraSweet, Spoonful, E951, Canderel, Benevia. But let's just say you go to Splenda. That's another very poisonous product that's basically chlorine if you like to drink bleach. But there is a particular warning to diabetics because researchers found that diabetic patients using sucralose showed a statistically significant increase in glycosylated hemoglobin, which is a marker that's used to assess glycemic control in diabetic patients. And according to the FDA, increases in this imply a lessening of control of diabetes. So, and then asulfame potassium, there you've got another one that caused cancer and leukemia in original studies. And if you keep on going around with all these products that they put out, they've got additives in it and chemicals. They've got Truvia now, but they put erythritol in it, and we're getting all these complaints.
Well, I know you're a proponent of chicory, right, instead of sugar.
Right, and I was just going to bring that up. Thank God for just like sugar because, Dr. Blaylock, the neurosurgeon, insisted that we analyze it, and it's food. There is absolutely no chemicals in it. Chicory's been used for 70 years to improve the health of diabetics.
It's an herb, right?
Right, and then you've got orange peel.